Alrighty, everybody, let's continue on this. I guess it's a recap / preview because we just talked a ton about what happened last weekend, what went wrong, what went right. Now it's time to look ahead, turn the page. Both the Bears and the Texans are 1-0. So there's actually 6 matchups this weekend, or 6 teams this weekend who are going to be they're both 1-0 battling each other. So it's going to be an interesting weekend in NFL. But Cole Thompson joining me. He's part of the Texans Wire. If you remember back at a Hall of Fame game, which seems now like forever ago, Cole, you joined me then. How much has anything changed in Houston since Hall of Fame game to now? Has there been any significant changes?
For starters, I was waiting for the phone call. It took it all week for me to get to me. I was like, oh my God, Taylor's not going to leave me off this time. No, nothing's really changed minus the fact that you have a healthy Joe Mixon, which might make this team more lethal on the ground. I was on a podcast yesterday talking about what this team did last year. And 10-7 was a good mark for a first-year coach with a young quarterback, but you felt like that CJ had to grow up in front of your eyes because there was no run game. There was no security blanket in that second move. The offense had to win through the air. They had to win through consistent plays. And now you get that second gear with Joe Mixon, who comes on over from Cincinnati, who's fully healthy. He's recovered from the quad injury. And the guy fits the offense because of whether or not we say that Zach Taylor and Bobby Slowick run the same brand of offense, the ideologies are basically cut from the same Shanahan cloth. So you have a good understanding about what you want to do in the run game. And you watched last week when he got to the outside corner, he was physical of being able to push up field for an extra few yards. He wasn't afraid to lower his shoulder. He was embracing contact. And so now you add that into the mix along with a more stable version of what you're going to get in the front seven, which I thought was a very weak point during training camp. I thought the secondary looked good. And lo and behold, the problem was that the pass rush just wasn't getting to the quarterback, probably because they want to keep CJ Stroud upright, which allowed you to see the flaws in the deep ball passes that Anthony Richardson was able to sling it around the pill like no one's business. But the same point is, Taylor, like you can't be so annoyed at the secondary because both Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter combined for giving up 4 catches for 39 yards. And it was the safeties that allowed those 3 explosive plays. And really, that was 152 yards of the 212 passing yards that you saw from Anthony Richardson. So it's like, you still feel like this is a good team. Yeah. There's some flaws. Everyone has some flaws in the first game. Caleb Williams is not going to throw for 95 yards every single outing. And CJ Stroud and Joe Mixon are not going to look like all pros that are taking over the NFL week by week. We know that there is a middle ground for both.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I did a whole on helmets and heels. I did my whole tangent on how kind of off the entire offenses were in the NFL, aside from probably CJ Stroud and Baker Mayfield, were the 2 quarterbacks that you felt like, which wild, but it was what it was. And the rest, the amount of quarterbacks that threw under 200 yards, the amount of quarterbacks that didn't have any touchdowns or maybe just 1 touchdown, a ton of picks thrown. And so those are things that change, obviously, between just week 1 and 2 alone, but throughout the season, like you said. But I know we'll talk a ton about the offense. I want to talk a little bit about the defense because, as you mentioned, there's 2 guys coming off the edge in Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter who are vicious. Danielle Hunter absolutely killed the Bears last season in both meetings. So I know they have that in the back of their head. And then now you get Will Anderson on the other side. There is a fun little storyline there because all of the film we watched of Darnell Wright when that we drafted him, he went up against Will Anderson and kind of shut him down in that one time that he was matched across from Will Anderson. So it's kind of their rematch game. That'll be a fun little storyline to kind of follow. But tell us about those edges. I know last week, I think they only ended up getting 2 sacks last week, but they're the kind of guys that even if they're not getting that official sack number, they're creating so much, they're wreaking so much havoc up front and creating so much pressure. Tell us about that, what expectations of what to expect on the edge.
For me, just personally as an SEC guy, I cannot wait to have the 3rd Saturday in October rematch down at NRG Stadium on Sunday Night Football. That's going to be great. But no, I think what you have to look at is the impressive part about Houston's defensive line was they didn't get any sacks from Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. The sacks came up the middle from the new guys in Foley Fodakoski and Mario Edwards Jr. That's where you saw the pressure rate. And I think what's really interesting is that if you know anything about DeMeco Ryans' defense, he loves smaller body defensive tackles that can win with the lower center of gravity to be able to bull rush and add pressure up the middle. That's why you look at guys who have fit the brand of San Francisco's defense for years because they are a lot smaller, but they're bull rushers and they're quick, they're agile. And so when you add that level and you lose a guy like Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins, you try to improve that by getting guys who fit that are cost friendly. But Daniil, again, the thing that we know about him and that you guys unfortunately know about him is that he is a wrecking machine coming off the edge, and he's physical. He looks like an action figure. I mean, like, there's no other way to put it, but the man is just built to scare the living bejesus out of you. And I can only imagine what Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright are going to have to go up against. It's horrifying because I feel like that if he does not get calm with you and just build like a good relationship, he will eat you alive. And so that's what you can expect. But the thing is that it's going to be the Will Anderson game. He was a guy that last year took so many strides very early on in his career just to be able to win with finesse, with power. And keep in mind that this was a player that when he was at Alabama, he was an outside linebacker. And when they moved him down to the defensive line, he shifted inside to play a 4-eye technique. So he was kind of learning the bases of how to be a pass rusher with his hand in the dirt full time, coming off the edge. And you wonder, well, he got bullied at times. And so he said this offseason, one of the big things that he wanted to do was build up his bulk. He wanted to keep the speed, but he wanted to add a little bit more size to him. So he gained about 16 pounds of muscle that's going to give him the ability to hold that leverage on the outside. What I think is going to be really interesting is how quickly can Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright make this more so a game where they shift to the outside and they allow the open creases from that C gap. Because if you're able to kind of take them out by shuffling towards the corner, you might allow Caleb a little bit more time to set his feet, look downfield, make the right decisions. Because if you're already going to get that interior pressure from Foley Fotakowski and from Mario Edwards Jr. So the last thing you want to do is watch as a stunt move happens where a Braxton Jones loses a rep to Will Anderson from the inside track. And now you have two guys closing in the middle and Caleb has to throw into coverage, which could lead to an interception. And again, this is a team that is known for getting takeaways. Last year, top 10 in the ability to create pressure rate and top 10 in takeaways.
Yeah, and I think that when you're speaking on that interior, good news for the Texans is the interior of the Bears offensive line is probably the weakest. They've been trying to figure that out. Now we find out today Ryan Bates didn't practice, so that's one of the guys that they've been figuring. Coleman Shelton's been kind of labeled as that center. The right guard has gone, Nate Davis and Ryan Bates. They've been rotating that, trying to figure out who is better. And now Ryan Bates looks like he might not play, so it's going to be kind of forced into this line that maybe they don't want. And if you're creating interior pressure, that sounds like a disaster. Are there concerns at all when it comes to, because obviously Dylan Horton, and I'm sorry if you hear this dog barking, because they're not my dogs. I was like, I am dog sitting. I told you this off air, but this
they're voicing their opinion on why Caleb's going to kick ass this week. That's what they're doing.
I hope so. But I could tell. I'm like, they're probably like, why this girl come home and then put me in a room while she's talking. But so obviously Autry and Dylan Horton both not playing, and so is that a concern at all when it comes to the rotation on the edge?
I don't think so, because when you really pinpoint it, Autry's a guy that's going to play a mix of both roles, kind of similar to Mario Edwards. They brought him in because of his ability to be a defensive tackle from his time in Indianapolis. But he spent the last 3 years playing defensive end in a 3-4 technique. So he's more so going to be used as that situational pass rusher that you can work against the run inside or outside. The Dylan Horton news is still a sad situation because of, again, he was kind of turning the corner and then unfortunately got diagnosed with lymphoma, had to go on the NFI list. But you still have Derek Barnett and you still have Jerry Hughes. Hughes has been in the league for 14 years now. He's been a very consistent, quality number 2 pass rusher. Now he's kind of taken over as that number 4 role. And to be completely frank, one of the big reasons why the Texans were able to keep pace last year was because Derek Barnett landed on waivers. And he ended up being a really interesting find. He had 3.5 sacks and 4 tackles for losses when he had to fill in for Jonathan Grenard and for Will Anderson. So he's kind of like that multi-chess piece that can play both sides of the line. You can shift him inside whenever you're trying to pass rush. So let's say you're losing battles with Foley Fotakowski. What you'll do is when you know it's a 3rd and long and you need to be able to force Caleb into making mistakes, you throw Barnett into the 3-eye technique. He wins against a guy such as Tevin Jenkins, or in this situation, it kind of sounds like it's going to be Nate Davis for you guys going into this game. So that's what you'll do. They feel confident in the 2 veterans because if they've been in these situations before where they are rotational guys. Naturally, Danico Autry, you're paying $10 million per year for him to be that difference maker. You want him on the field, but you also are okay with having Jerry Hughes and Derek Barnett be average to slightly above average number 3 pass rushers in this unit.
when you're talking about, let's switch over to the Bears defensive side, because I think a lot of the strengths we knew, well, a lot of us had the feeling the secondary was going to be good. It was a thing. Jalen Johnson, one of the best corners in the league.
Yeah.
Tyreek Stevenson just keeps getting better. We just saw the pick that he got from Will Levis, even though a very weird thing that Will Levis was doing in that moment. But Tyreek Stevenson just keeps getting better. Kyler Gordon, too, at that nickel corner spot has really proven himself quickly, too. And then you get Kevin Byard, who I think was a great addition because it just adds some like veteran side to that safety room, which I knew they had Eddie Jackson. Eddie Jackson struggled, had a lot of missed tackles, had some issues there. It looks like those things are kind of solved. There was confidence there. There was confidence in the linebackers and Tremaine Edmonds and obviously TJ Edwards. The line was a concern, and I think that outside of Montez Sweat, there was a lot of expectations of how big of a jump Javon Dexter can make. Andrew Billings, who's been a very solid under the rating signing, honestly,
really under the radar signing.
Yeah, he's just, especially against the run, he's so good. But then that other side across from Montez Sweat, Cole, has been a very big question mark. Not very long ago, they go and make a trade with Seattle, getting Darrell Taylor. Darrell Taylor gets 2 sacks, multiple pressures, forced fumble, was all over the field in this game. Now, I don't know how much that changes if they're going to ease off of DeMarcus Walker a little bit, or maybe they'll just evenly rotate them and see what goes on. But pleasantly pleased by the pass rush, to be honest, from last week, which was one of my biggest concerns. What, from your side of the ball, are you guys looking at when it comes to the defense and what Texans have to face with this defense?
What's really interesting, Taylor, is that both DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud gave a huge testament to what that secondary does. And they brought up Jalen Johnson's name. They brought up Tyreek Stevenson's name. CJ even said, I remember playing against Jaquan Brisker and his ability to be a ball magnet when he was at Penn State. So the experience about playing against number 9, who was one of my favorite safeties to scout when he was coming out of Penn State a few years ago. Kyler Gordon, as you brought up, I hated that they played him on the outside. I knew that he was going to have to fit in the slot. He's done a really nice job at that standpoint. DeMeco Ryans mentioned that the thing that really makes Chicago's defense hard to game plan for is that he likes watching as TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds play in coverage. So it takes away the middle of the field, the way you want to utilize your tight ends, the way you want to utilize your slot receivers. The thing that I wonder about in this game is, can you continue to build on the ground with Joe Mixon and really on the outside edge? Because Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner made life hell in yards after contact for Mixon when he had to run through A-gap, because they're just bigger bodies that were winning against the interior blocking for Houston. But the outside corner, you watched as he was able to get initial contact and immediately pick up 2, 3, 4, 6 yards after plays, to where you set up a second and manageable, you set up a third and short, and it opened up the playbook for various formations. So I feel like that until you have to start delivering those deep shots to Nico Collins, the quick routes on the outside to Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs being an absolute cannon of a magnet, you don't have to throw the football, because if you still have that element of trusting your ground game. The problem is that, and I was on the show yesterday here in Houston talking about, you have a 29-year-old running back that has been known for having the ability to be a workhorse. I think if you put all of his years fully healthy in Cincinnati, he averaged like 243 carries per season. But that was also when he was 26 and not 29, and on a 3-year contract where you expect him to be your main source of running, and a big reason why he is going to take pressure off of CJ. So I think what's going to be really interesting in this game is, how quickly can you find the chink in the armor of whatever that may be at that second level? If it's Kyler Gordon, if it's Tremaine Edmonds, if it's TJ Edwards in coverage, that will allow you to target, whether it be Brevin Jordan, Dalton Schultz, who right now may or may not play in this game. He's dealing with an ankle injury. Cade Stover, the rookie out of Ohio State. Stephon Diggs, who's going to be the slot receiver for this matchup. I think that you want to target that intermediate part of the field and really that middle part of the field, because you know that you're going to lose battles in Jalen Johnson versus Tank Dell or Tyreek Stevenson versus Nico Collins. You're not going to win every battle. But if you can take that middle part of the field, and even if that includes using the ground game as well, that's going to be, I think, a big blessing in disguise. The thing that really helped for Houston is, even though they weren't great on third down against Indianapolis, they set up third and manageable. The last thing you want to do is be third and uncomfortable. You don't want to show your hands on what you have to do when you open up the playbook. I think that that's really the difference between these two matchups.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think that last week, obviously, the defense played well. It took a little bit, honestly, for them to get going. It also, a lot of people are saying, okay, it was Will Levis, but I also think when you look at some of the people, you're going against a Tyler Boyd and a Calvin Ridley and a DeAndre Hopkins, and it's not like they don't have receivers and weapons in Tennessee. They just have some question marks around that quarterback, who some people are high on. There's guys like Pete Prisco who think Will Levis is going to be something, but I think most don't completely agree with that. But when it comes to the Bears side of the offense, you mentioned under 100 passing yards, no offensive touchdowns. It was the weirdest game. We won because we had a blocked punt touchdown, pick six, and then a 2-point conversion is what ended up winning the game for Chicago. Very weird, very quirky. So is Houston kind of looking at this offense as being stagnant, or are they looking, do you think they're looking at it as being like, okay, that's a one-off, this is week 2, it's going to be a little bit different?
CJ said the thing that stands out about Caleb Williams is his ability to make those wow throws and that he's a hyper athlete. The thing is also that he mentioned that sometimes making the right read and making the quick read and the small read will set you up for better success. To be yourself in this game, don't allow yourself to be hindered by what you think your energy should be. And he knows this because of, again, much like Caleb, this was a guy that came into a situation where he was supposed to be the savior of a franchise, but the difference is when you talk to Texans fans, they had to get a new savior because of the Deshaun Watson situation. And Bears fans have been hearing this was the year we're going to have a 4,000-yard passer since the creation back in 1920. So it's a little bit of a different feel. But still, I think the thing that stands out is that the wide receivers are special in Chicago. Now, what happens with Keenan Allen? What happens with Roma Dunze? Whether injury report, neither practice today. The MCL injury is one that you don't want to risk with the Dunze, so maybe he won't play. Maybe you activate Tyler Scott in this game, but it takes away an element of superstardom. They can throw it. I mean, I've watched so much tape on Caleb Williams just from college and scouting him. The accuracy is there. The arm strength is there. The ability to create madhouse backyard football plays is phenomenal. And he's got that touch on the football that a wide receiver that is at the caliber of a Keenan Allen, especially at the caliber of DJ Moore, will be able to adjust on the fly, track it down, and get a big play. And the big thing that you have to look at if you're a Texans fan, are you going to be susceptible once again to the big plays? Because last week, for most of the afternoon, Anthony Richardson did not have a lot of success. There was a lot of 3-and-outs. He overshot Adonai Mitchell. I can't count how many times. But he also found a way to get Ashton Doolin a 56-yard touchdown. And he found a way to get Alec Pierce a 61-yard touchdown. And then he had a 56-yard pass to Alec Pierce. And so those 3 plays took up 60% of the throws. And you have a young cornerback in Kamari Laster that honestly reminds me a lot of Tyreek Stevenson, where the hype coming out of college was really promising. Not the best rookie year, but then a rebounding next year to where it's like, okay, great number 2. We feel confident in him moving forward. Our secondary is safe. Derek Stingley, who now fully healthy, very much reminds me of Jalen Johnson. Gonna be a guy that you're gonna have to pay because of when he's on the field. It is a difference maker. But the slot position, you have Jalen Petrie, and now you have another young guy, whether it be Kalen Bullock or you have an insecure and kind of liability with Eric Murray opposite of Jimmy Ward. You can take those deep shots. So I think for Houston, they're trying to make sure that they're playing not just man coverage where things stay in front of them, but they're making it to where they have to throw it. They have to throw quick passes. That's where the pass rush comes in. Last week, it did feel like that Houston could have been able to get into the backfield. And when you said the sacks, of course, sacks don't tell the entire story. Yeah. But if you get a sack on Anthony Richardson, which again, another one of these hyper athletes that is just, he's built like one of one. There's nobody out there like him. If you can get Caleb down, then you don't have to worry about your secondary making the mental mistakes that they have. But sometimes you need that pass rush to get there because of there are those explosive plays that set you up inside the red zone to where Cairo Santos, who last week got 6 points and was a big difference in the win.
Yeah. Cairo's been very efficient. There was a couple of seasons ago where he was struggling and he admitted, he was like, I need to move it to a different hash mark, moved it to that hash mark since then, has been fantastic. So I like that he kind of identified, labeled, and changed what he felt was, obviously was wrong with the kicking. This is a little bit of a side note, but also part of the reason that last week also looked like an absolute hot mess in the first half. Velus Jones, was this do you remember him coming out? Like, out of Tennessee, he was this dude that was like this return man, and like he could do everything when it came to the return game. He cannot catch. It's insane that he can drop this many punt returns, kick returns, touchdowns, but not only drop it, but he like punted it like 10 yards after he dropped it. I was like, is that just luck or like what is going on there?
Taylor, I hated the pick. I'm not gonna lie. When it happened, I remember sitting inside the Texans draft room, and I remember watching him, and I was like, why in the third round are you taking a guy that probably at best is a kick returner or a punt returner, and he offers no value as a receiver? And also he's like 25. I was like, why are you?
He's like 28 years old now, and he's like,
you're taking an older prospect that you don't think is going to be that good at receiver. I remember I loathed that pick. That was that, and I grew up in a household with so many Bears fans, and I texted my cousin Greg, and he's like, I can't believe we just took a 25-year-old. It's like, oh, don't worry, it's going to get worse. He's not a receiver either.
By the way,
you're digging 6 feet deep. It's not looking promising for you guys right now. So I don't know. I mean, you got DeAndre Carter back there now, so maybe they'll change. But is Velus playing in this game? Because that's all. That's also a win.
I don't even know what they're going to do at this point, honestly, with him, because it's been too much. Like, it was honestly kind of a joke at first of, muffed punt, and then they took him off of punts and put him in kick returns, and they were like, well, he never dropped a kick return or fumbled a kick return in college. It was the punt returns. Like, he always kind of struggled with punts. So you move him there, and then now it's been multiple of those, and then you try and use him in the receiving game. He fumbled multiple of those. So then they try and move him to a running back, and that was kind of the hype in this offseason around Hard Knocks was, okay, well, move him, let him be a running back. And honestly, it didn't go terribly. I saw even last year towards the end during the Cleveland game, he was used as a running back a little bit. But it's just like you used a third-round pick on a guy that you literally don't even know where to put him on the football field. And to be honest, I think most people are just shouting, cut him at this point, because it's just he's hurting us way more than he's benefited us.
I mean, they were saying at one point he's a Kirkland Brand Deebo Samuel. Well, it's actually more so a Dabo shameful pick. That is what we got to call it at this point.
Yeah, I remember because I think that the Senior Bowl, I think maybe he played
Senior Bowl. He had such and this is the. I love the Senior Bowl. I love Jim Nagy. I love Mobile. I think it's an awesome environment to get these prospects out there. Not every person that looks good at the Senior Bowl is going to pan out. I remember that Hassan Reddick gained so much hype after the Senior Bowl, and they played him for the first time at outside linebacker, not a defensive end, because he was defensive end in college, and then immediately he had a good combine. He was taken 13th overall, and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good pick. You know, good for him at the Senior Bowl. It's like, we're going to play him at inside linebacker, and I'm just like, okay, well, you just wasted the 13th overall pick. Good job, Steve Kine. Appreciate you, buddy. That's the problem with the Senior Bowl is like, you get good film, but there have been so many times, and unfortunately, the Bears took one of my favorite players in Anthony Miller that looked great there, and I'm like, that's the Senior Bowl. Love for Anthony. The Senior Bowl lies. It just does.
And we've used it a few times, and some of it has worked in just the last 4 or 5 years. I think Ryan Poles likes the Senior Bowl maybe than previous GMs, because I want to say Darnell Wright he had a really good Senior Bowl. I think it was Darnell Wright.
I know Gervon Dexter was there one year. Zach Pickens was there one year. So
yes,
they were there. I knew that.
Because I feel like it was the year the Bears. I'm trying to remember what it was.
I don't know if Wright was there. There was a guy who did go from that class, and it wasn't just Dexter. There was somebody else. I'm blanking on who it was. Tyler Scott went there. I think, and Scott had a pretty decent day. And again, like sometimes you hit. Like Tank Dell looked awesome at the Senior Bowl, and I have to be the one to personally say I have to eat crow for Tank Dell. I hated the pick at first because of a 5'9", 165-pound receiver that was great at the University of Houston, but going up against lesser competition than what you see from other opponents. Also, I figured he was going to be a dude that probably was limited to the slot. Well, now he's your Z receiver, and he's absolutely a stud and is beloved in the city. And I was wrong. So you have to use both the film that you see at the Senior Bowl, but I think the beauty of what the Senior Bowl does, and this is where I give so much credit to Jim, I give so much credit to the scouting department, they make sure that they get the right players that probably won't get that shot at other opportunities, and they get them in front of scouts and GMs to have meetings to where they get to build those relationships before Indianapolis. And if they don't go to Indianapolis, well, you have that relationship to where you want to build and see what they are as a person and an individual. And the individual part is as important as the player that you're getting on the field.
So what are your expectations for this weekend? What team is it more important for to leave it with a win?
I feel like Chicago, if I'm being just honest, because you get a win like this, confidence starts to build. Like I remember last year when the Texans went down to Jacksonville, of all places. Oh, well, look at that, where you guys are. And we got the win in week 3. And Tank Dell
in Jacksonville.
and Tank Dell went off in that game. And that was really the start of the relationship between number 3 and number 7 being a go-to, let's just get this thing on the roll. And when they did that, a win like that over an opponent that is very hyped up to be one of the contenders or quote-unquote contenders, it allows you to have the ability to think that you can go toe-to-toe with anybody. And right now, depending on when the Bears play against Green Bay, I haven't looked at their schedule, but if they play against them when there is no 11. So, okay, you probably are facing Jordan Love twice. I apologize about that. But if you carry that momentum and you start getting wins over teams that are at your level or potentially a little bit better than you, then you start to stockpile. A quarterback gets to feel more confident. Confidence for a young player such as Caleb Williams is going to be a huge difference for what could be a 9-8 season or a 12-5 season or an 11-6 season. So you want to see him feel more adjusted to, I can do this against a team, against a DeMeco Ryans defense. But I also think for the Texans, it's important because every win counts, and people seem to still forget down here, as good as Houston looked against Indianapolis, you won by 2 points because if you trusted your wide receiver and Nico Collins, and you play a first-place schedule. You do. You play a first-place schedule, and so every win counts because of it benefits you keeping that lead over a Jacksonville that still has really good players, over a Tennessee that spent a lot of money in the offseason. I don't know what Will Levis is going to be, but I don't think neither just really Durant Carthon at this point. Neither does Brian Callahan. You look at Indianapolis. I mean, big-time plays, they were right in that game until the end, and they got a block punt similar to what Chicago got. They capitalized with the Jonathan Taylor touchdown. My fantasy team got points, so I'm not complaining that much about that. But still, it's like you see that if Houston can get another win, they stay one game ahead of everyone else in that division because they're all 0-1. So it's like, yes, Houston needs a win, but I think Chicago, just for the aura of that locker room, you barely squeaked by and you were down 17-3 at one point going into halftime against a Tennessee team. If you beat Houston in their own backyard in a night game where that atmosphere for the first time is going to be ravenous since 2022 and really since 2019, it carries a lot of weight for what that locker room can be going into week 3 and moving even deeper and deeper into the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it is like getting that a little bit of confidence built, because I don't think Caleb Williams is one of the guys who after a bad game is going to completely crash, but you do want to start to build something. And especially if Rome's not playing, if Rome and Keenan aren't playing, it's going to be very scary. But yeah, I'm a little worried about that. It'll be Tyler Scott, and hopefully they actually use Cole Kmet this week. But it will be interesting. It was funny when you just said that the Texans-Jags game here in Jacksonville, because that was like Tank Dell's like, okay, this is Tank Dell. I specifically remember tweeting, like, I think Jacksonville got the wrong Tank because they got Bigsby, yeah. Which also he looks like he's doing better than last season. But at that point I was like, we should have got Dell and not Bigsby. This is a problem.
No, it was a good game. But like those are the type of games that you're looking for. It's like where Stroud felt comfortable and he's not playing from behind and he has that number 1. And you're probably not getting a dude say, like, let's call a spade a spade. He's probably not playing this week because you need him. But like imagine if he and DJ Moore just build that relationship. And now Moore gets a 200-yard performance. And, oh, lo and behold, now we paid him a lot of money because we believe he can be a number 1. And now we got our franchise quarterback easily putting him on the money. They're going to be fine. Like, that's what you're looking for in this game.
Yeah, I think most fans are just looking over like 100 yards at this point, and it's honestly sad. Like I kind of laughed at the end because I was like, Justin Fields did this, I think like 4 times where he had 100 passes under 100 yards passing, and everyone just gave him hell. And then so for not saying like I'm cheering for Caleb Williams, but obviously I told you a long time ago I was like a pro. Let's build around Justin, and everyone immediately told me it was going to be like, oh, 4,000 yards passing. It could still happen. It's going to be a long shot at this point. But in my head, I was like, this is the most Bears thing to happen. You get this quarterback that is supposed to be and he can't get 100 passing yards at home. And I was like, okay.
I had the Titans.
I know. I will say that defensive front, I think, looks better than maybe some people thought it was going to be.
Their secondary is really interesting to me, too.
Devontae Sweat looked good, and like obviously he's a rookie, and he was already kind of, like he was making some splashes on there. I honestly think their defense will be decent, but it is Will Levis. Yeah. But anyways, thanks Cole so much. Have fun this weekend. I know it's a late game Sunday night, which that means I get to think about it all day long and wait.
Yep. No, it's going to be great. I cannot wait to show up at the press box at 5 p.m. to show up at 3 a.m. to wake up the next day and be talking all things SEC, talking all things Texans, and at 8:30 be like, why am I here? Why am I here at 8:30 in the morning? I should have just bought a cot and slept.
Yes, just stayed here. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you for chatting with me again, and we'll talk again, I'm sure.
I guarantee it. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.